Okay, I think it's 6:04 now. I think we'll go ahead and get started. And if folks join us late, we'll try and catch them up. Welcome. For those of you who have joined us, thanks for taking time out of your evening tonight for the Northeast Denver Mobility Projects. This is the second in a series of meetings that have covered these roadways. So I want to start out with whether anybody would like language interpretation. Everybody, for interpretation, you do need to be on a tablet or a computer, and you would go to the globe icon at the bottom right of your screen, and everybody needs to select a language, English or Spanish.
Hola y bienvenidos, me llamo Ivonne Culín. Para escuchar la interpretación, haga el favor de conectarse usando una tableta o una computadora. Pulse el icono del globo que está en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla. También pueden seleccionar el lenguaje de su preferencia. Gracias.
So we're going to wait just a second while everybody selects a language. Okay. We're going to move on to rules of engagement. We have 3 basic rules, and they're pretty obvious. This is just how to keep friendly during this meeting. In input, and I just realized I didn't select a language. Let me do that. Okay, mine won't let me select a language. So let me know, team, if it's a problem, if you're not hearing me. Okay. So if you would like to give some input and you're on a computer, please use the chat box. And you can also use the raise your hand function at any point during this session. And we have a few different Q&A sessions, times to ask questions at the end of each topic. Please be respectful in anything you chat or say, and don't use profanities or inappropriate language. And also, if you're asking a question out loud, please speak slowly. We are doing dual language here, and that will be helpful for everybody involved. A bit of orientation for those not familiar with Zoom. First of all, note that we are recording this meeting, and that just means that's because we can then post it on the website for you to send to your neighbors or watch again later. The button functions here you'll see on your screen are mute and unmute. You come in muted, and at times throughout, if you raise your hand, we'll ask you or invite you to unmute, but please stay muted for now. And you can have your video on or off, whatever your preference is. If you're having bandwidth issues, if it's getting choppy, turning your video off can sometimes help. And then lastly, in purple here, you'll see the chat feature. If you click that, it'll open up and will give you another window that you can chat in. Folks calling in, if you have questions, I will try and get, I don't see anybody calling in, but if there is anybody that I'm not seeing, feel free to email bikes@denver.gov, or I will try and go through those folks and call on them at the end of the meeting if you have comments. And just a reminder that, we're here today. Please be respectful when you're chatting with your neighbors. We're here today to keep you informed about this project, and also to give us, so you can give us your thoughts and let us know what we missed. Our overview, kind of our agenda tonight, you'll see is split up into 3 sections. We're going to do a little bit of project introduction and background. And then after that, we have 6:10 is what we show, but we're already almost there. We're going to talk about 51st Avenue and go through an overview of the corridor, some design, and the project schedule. And then we'll have a Q&A session after that one. And then we'll do the same thing for 53rd Avenue. And after all of that, we'll wrap back up with next steps, what to expect, and a final Q&A session. We'll likely be out of here by 7 o'clock today, but we want to make sure that the project team hangs around in case there are continued questions. I wanted to introduce your city team. This is your DOTI, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, your DOTI team of planners, designers, and engineers who've been working hard on this project. And obviously I'm here on the left, Alicia Zimmerman. Paige Colton will be presenting the majority of this, and she is the planning lead for DOTI. And then Dana Hoffman is community designer. Adam and Sarah are the project managers for 51st and 53rd. And Bryce and Hadar are the engineering leads. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Paige so that she can start into the background.
Awesome. Thanks, Alicia, and welcome everybody. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background. You may have already seen these slides before. We kind of use them in every presentation, but it gives a background about why we're doing what we're doing. So we have some pretty ambitious mobility goals here at the city. One of our main goals is to increase the number of people who bike, walk, and take transit to work to 30% by 2030. We also want to reduce our emissions by 80% by 2050. And then we also want to have 0 traffic deaths, so deaths on our streets, by 2030. Next slide. So us at DOTI, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, we manage what we call the right-of-way. And that includes everything from travel lanes, parking lanes, bike lanes, sidewalks, the tree lawn in between your sidewalk and the street. So it's really the largest and one of the most important public spaces in Denver. So it's a space for everybody, and DOTI manages that. We also have a lot of competing uses in that space, and we kind of have a constrained, what we call a constrained right-of-way. So we have buildings built up around our streets and our sidewalks. So we're kind of working with a limited amount of space to meet everyone's needs. So how did we come up with these projects that we're going to be talking about tonight? Well, at the city, we do a lot of planning, which means we talk to the community, we analyze data, we kind of go back and forth, and we develop these plans for how we envision our city to be in the future. So our main plans where these projects came from are Blueprint Denver, which is our land use and transportation plan here at the city. We've also got Denver Moves Bikes, which shows a network of bikeways that the community would like to build out in the future. And then specifically for kind of the far northeast area, we've got the Far Northeast Area Plan, which is kind of a specific neighborhood plan for land use and transportation and parks that the community worked on with our CPD department, our Community Planning and Development Department in 2018 and 2019. So how do we make improvements on our streets? Well, we have a number of different programs that each kind of get allocated a bucket of money. And the bucket of money we're talking about here tonight is our repaving money. So every year we repave around 500 miles of, maybe I just made that number up. Don't quote me on the number. We repave a lot of streets in our city, and we're able to redo the striping on those streets at the same time. And that's when we're able to install painted bike lanes right after we repave a street. We've also got a number of other programs like making signal upgrades, making improvements around schools. We have a program to fill in sidewalk gaps. We have a program to do maintenance on our streets. So lots of different programs, but tonight we're kind of talking about our repaving program and then installing bike lanes after that repaving. So we're going to be talking about two main corridors tonight. We have East 51st Ave from Central Park Boulevard to Havana kind of in the Northfield area. And then we've got East 53rd Ave between Chambers and Memphis Street in the Gateway area, just south of Parkfield Lake Park. And then last time we were here meeting with you all about a month ago, we talked about North Dallas Street between 51st and 56th Ave. And we're not going to be talking about that one tonight because it's a pretty straightforward project that doesn't have a lot of impacts for folks, but we'll be talking about it at the end in terms of when we're going to be installing that project. Okay, so starting with East 51st Ave. So we are proposing installing a buffered bike lane along this full corridor that's surrounded in red. So again, Central Park Boulevard to Havana. We are proposing removing parking from both sides of the street. You can move on. Okay, so why this corridor? Well, we've got a bike lane or a buffered bike lane to the east of Havana Street already, and it connects into Montbello. To the west, we've got a bike lane on Prairie Meadow Drive. We've also got bike lanes on Central Park Boulevard itself. And then we're also going to be connecting that North Dallas Street that I had talked about before up to the north. So it'll make some really great bikeway connections kind of in the east-west direction. We're also going to be improving the crossings at Central Park Boulevard and Havana specifically for people biking, which will also make it easier for vehicles to kind of navigate the bikes and pedestrians in those intersections as well. Okay, so what does the street look like today? We currently have bike lanes from Central Park Boulevard to Dallas, and it's a pretty, what we call a typical cross section. So we've got parking on both sides, we've got 6-foot bike lane on either side, and then we've got the travel lane. From Dallas to Havana, it's is it the same width? I actually don't remember. Can you go back a slide real quick? Similar width, but we don't have those bike lanes. So you've got really wide parking lanes and really wide travel lanes. In both of these sections, the posted speed limit is 30 miles per hour. We've seen over the past 5 years about 30 vehicle crashes along the corridor. And generally what we see in cities that have higher bicycle ridership is we actually have a lower risk of severe crashes for everybody using our streets, biking, walking, taking transit, driving. We looked at speed and volumes along the corridor. And so we're at that 30 miles per hour speed limit. And then we've got about 4,500 vehicles per day that travel on this stretch. And what that tells us is, if you look at that chart, we look at volume and we look at speed, and we're kind of in the bike lane buffer preferred range here. So it's safest to have a buffered bike lane along this corridor. We also looked at how people are using the parking. And what we found is, generally speaking, we looked at early morning, we looked at weekend morning, we looked at weekday, midday, and parking is about 80% available along this entire stretch. And it kind of varies where you are along the corridor. The highest parked is right to the west of Havana, that yellow bar. But the rest is not what we call not parked up. A lot of parking open along the corridor at most times of the day. Okay, so we talked with a number of stakeholders in the area, Wicker Park representative, some of the industrial companies that are along to the east of Dallas Street. And we also put out a survey, and an online survey that anyone could fill out. And then we also had a public meeting about a month ago where we talked about all of this. And this is kind of a summary of all the comments we received and what they were about. So we heard improved safety for all, other existing conditions, which kind of includes truck traffic and truck parking, prioritizing bicycle safety, and then parking. We're all kind of up there in top topics. We heard that vehicle speeding is a concern. It's a truck route. Kind of paired with that, the safety of riding a bicycle on the corridor with it being a truck route. Concerns about the loss of street parking. Concerns because it's a truck route, is it appropriate for a bike lane? And then lastly, that intersection safety. So you have trucks, you have bicyclists, they can't necessarily see each other all the time. How do we account for that in our design? So these are kind of the four main categories that I mentioned of what we heard. So safety for all users, how we address this. Well, having a buffered bike lane will first create a dedicated space for people biking and for people driving. So separate those out so there's less conflict. There's also that significant buffer between people biking and people driving. I think we've got 7 foot of buffer on either side in that one area and a little bit less to the west of Dallas, but a significant amount of horizontal space between those two users. In terms of trucks and truck movements and truck parking, so we are repurposing that parking lane all along the entire corridor, and especially the part that's used for truck storage into a buffered bike lane. So bicyclists will not be riding between parked and moving trucks. They'll just be riding next to the curb. There'll be a buffer, and then there'll be moving trucks. In terms of parking, we looked at parking elsewhere in the area, and we think there's quite a bit of unrestricted, unused parking in the industrial area where the trucks who currently park along 51st can go. And then there's also quite a bit of unrestricted parking in Wicker Park as well for residents in that area. In terms of intersection safety, we're going to be adding conflict markings, which are those green kind of stripes that go vertically across an intersection. That signals where bicyclists should go. We'll show a picture where bicyclists should go, and then also lets cars know and drivers know, hey, there might be someone bicycling here. We'll be doing that at Havana and Central Park Boulevard. Okay, so this is a cross section of what the buffered bike lane will look like from Central Park Boulevard to Dallas. We've got that 7 foot bike lane, 5 to 6 foot buffer on either side. And then we've got 11 foot drive lanes. And it'll kind of look like that bike lane on the left, but with a little more space, I think, for everybody. From Dallas to Havana, pretty much same cross section. So 7 foot bike lane, 7 foot buffer, and then those 11 foot drive lanes. So this is an example and an aerial of what the intersection of 51st Ave, Prairie Meadow Drive, and Central Park Boulevard will look like. So you've got conflict markings, which are those stripes that go all the way across to show that bicyclists will be traveling to the west or the east. You've also got these bike boxes, those boxes with a little bike in them, and that's for bicyclists turning. So if you are going west on a bicycle and you want to turn south, you can go like that, wait in that box until the light turns green to go south. So that eliminates the need for a bicyclist to jump into that left turn lane and try to merge with traffic to make a left turn. at Havana Street, so we're connecting to a buffered bike lane to the east. What we're doing is, again, with those conflict markings, and then we've also moved the stop bar for vehicles. So that's where vehicles have to stop when there's a red light. We've moved that back, and we've moved the bike stop bar a little bit forward. So what that means is anybody in a vehicle will be able to look and see the bike because they'll be in front of them. So if they're taking that right turn, they're more likely to see a bicyclist who might be crossing Havana at that location. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and see if anyone has any questions.
It doesn't look like we've gotten questions in the chat. I did see that somebody, I believe, joined on the phone. If you have a question, we have a good balance here. So you're welcome to raise your hand, or, you know, if we don't see a raise in your hand, you can even just try unmuting as long as we don't have pandemonium. But again, click that little chat icon and enter your question or raise your hand. Anybody? Sounds like you're doing a good job, Paige. Okay, Paige, I've got one for you then real quick. Can you explain again, remind us why a buffered bike lane, how it looks different than a typical bike lane?
Yeah, definitely. So a typical bike lane is just a white line on either side of where you're biking, and then you're right next to traveling cars or maybe parked cars, depending on the situation. A buffered bike lane provides more space between you as a bicyclist and the moving vehicles and or the parking. If there's a lot of parking turnover, for example, so it's like a high use retail area with lots of parked cars and doors opening, you might want to provide a buffer on both sides of the bike lane. But in this situation, since the bike lane is next to the curb, we put all that space between the bike lane and the drive lane to really separate out essentially people who are traveling at different speeds. You know, bicycles are traveling much slower than a car typically. So the idea is to separate those speeds so there's no conflict.
Great, thank you, Paige. And Wayne, who I know has asked a question or two before too, thank you, Wayne, for coming, asks, what is the time frame for the repaving and who is doing the paving, the city or a private contractor?
Yeah, and so the timing is a little bit up in the air yet, but maybe I'll see if Adam is on the line and he can jump in and answer this question.
Yep, I'm on. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can.
Awesome. Yeah, so as of right now, we wanted to hold these public meetings, so that pushed the timing of the paving for later this summer. It's my understanding we're aiming, towards the July timeframe. As we get closer, obviously we'll notify, residents in the community of when that date is. But right now, I think we were more focused on having these public meetings to get input on our design prior to going out and paving, as well as putting the striping down for the bikes as well. As far as who will be doing the repaving, that again will be determined down the road. We have both in-house crews as well as on-call contractors who are able to. Again, as we get closer, we will be notifying, who will be doing the repaving, what to expect as we get closer, and that information will be sent out to the community.
Adam, one more question for you too that people may wonder about. I know we don't have details for this corridor, but in a typical paving corridor, where does the city store their stuff and how long does it take? Do they store equipment out there, or are they just coming in and out every day?
Yeah, it kind of depends. I mean, on a corridor like this, you know, the parking will be restricted, so they will have some room to store uh, some vehicles out there if they need to. But typically, yeah, we'll just kind of store them, you know, either where we've milled the pavement down and haven't paved yet, or they will be bringing them in daily as needed.
Okay. Great, thank you. We have any other questions here? I don't see any up. Nope. Okay, I think we will move on to 53rd. And if you, let's see, I don't see any of somebody on my team, let me know. I don't see anybody on their phone anymore. Regardless, we'll have 2 other points when you can ask questions and we can come back to 51st if we need to. So, okay, Paige, moving on to 53rd.
Excellent. Okay, so let's skip to the next slide. So we're talking about East 53rd Ave between Chambers Road and Memphis Street, so just south of Parkfield Lake Park. And we are proposing a buffered bike lane in kind of the small western segment, and then a regular bike lane along most of the corridor. And we're proposing removing parking from that western portion from both sides, and then from one side of the street east of there. Okay, so why this project? We've got a couple different connections into that existing north-south trail on the east side of Parkfield. We've got connections to the shared use path on Chambers Road, and those are supposed to be kind of wider sidewalks for people walking and biking to share. And we've also, of course, got connections to the park, the schools, both to the north and the south, and then eventually Kit Ridge and the trail to the east that is not yet even built will eventually connect out there. Okay, so today we have kind of 2 different cross sections or what the street looks like. From Chambers to Adelia, we've got this big median, pretty big travel lane, and then pretty big parking lane. And right now, nobody really parks in the parking lane. So it's just a really wide, essentially straightaway for cars to go down. Next slide. Okay, so from Adelia to Memphis, this is moving east. We've got 8-foot parking lanes on either side, which is standard. And then we've got 12-foot travel lanes in the middle. And we've got a posted speed along the whole thing of 25 miles per hour. So what do our crashes look like? So over the past 5 years, there have been 3 crashes involving pedestrians, so people walking along the corridor. We've had 1 crash involving a bicycle, and then we've had 41 vehicle crashes, which, if you remember, based on the other corridor, we only had 30. So this is, pretty high relative to how short it is. And again, having higher bicycling, we generally see less severe crashes in cities that have that high bicycling. Okay, so in terms of average traffic and speed, so lower volumes and speeds than on 51st, we've got a median speed of 25 miles per hour, and we call 85th percentile, or 85% of people are going 24 miles per hour or less. Tell me if I'm saying that incorrectly. So it's a much calmer street essentially than 51st Ave.
There's both 85th percentile. Sorry about the color.
Okay. In terms of parking, we only looked at that 5 a.m. Because we were a little restricted by COVID. But what we found is most of the parking is not used by residents, except just on the eastern portion, on the southern side, so near that big residential area. We also know that there's quite a bit of parking right in front of the school on both sides of the streets. And then on Kittredge, we have a loading zone as well. Okay, so in terms of what feedback we've collected, so we had an online survey, we had that meeting about a month ago, and then we've also been talking to stakeholders in the area, including the school, to kind of figure out what needs are. So the biggest items that we've heard are parking, prioritizing bicycle safety, and improving safety for all. More specifically, we've heard concerns about loss of parking for public events at park fields and the school campus and the apartment residents. We've had requests for safe and comfortable bike lanes. And then again, concerns about vehicle speeding, which I think we kind of hear on every street in Denver, unfortunately, but we can do something about it here. So these are kind of the main items that we've heard. And so how we're addressing each one. So we heard concerns about parking removal. So our proposal is to maintain parking along the south side of the streets from Adelia all the way to Memphis. So that's the majority of the corridor. And then allow additional parking on the north side of the street, just west of Kittredge for just a block. And that's because we have extra right of way or space in the streets. And we figured we should, provide as much parking as possible. So we have a little bit extra on the north side there. In terms of bicycle safety, again, we're splitting up where bicyclists ride and where vehicles are to kind of create comfort for both users. In terms of speeding, so bike lanes help visually narrow lanes for drivers, which helps improve speed compliance or people going the speed limit. And especially in that area right to the east of Chambers, we've got that really wide thoroughfare next to the median. That'll really help there too. In terms of school loading and pedestrian safety, so again, we're maintaining that parking along the south side of 53rd Ave, which is where that school is. And that will allow students to park and or load on the same side of the street as the school. So wherever they're being dropped off or parking, they'll be able to just hop onto the sidewalk and then walk to the school on the same side of the street. So this is our proposed cross section for Chambers to Adelia. And so as I mentioned, we're removing that parking lane, which is rarely used, adding a really wide buffer and then a bike lane. And then from Adelia to Memphis, we've got a 5-foot bike lane and then our 2 travel lanes, the 6-foot bike lane, and then a parking lane. And we typically do a bike lane a little bit wider next to a parking lane so people can kind of ride wherever they want in the lane, especially if their car is parked and they're worried about somebody opening their door into the bicyclist. So this is just an above view of what this will look like. So we've got the bike lane on the north side, right adjacent to the curb. We've got our 2 travel lanes, another bike lane for the other direction, and then our parking lane. Here's what it would look like at Chambers. So we've got those same conflict markings across the road, connecting into that shared use path on Chambers on the west side of the street. This is right at Adelia and the park entrance. And as you can see, we've got that narrowed down amount of space for people to drive in. And then we've got the narrowed, kind of visually narrowed street by adding the bike lane in to the east of Adelia. And I guess one more thing to add is that when you don't have a lot of parking, the street looks really wide for someone driving. They have all that space to play with and they go faster. So by adding in this bike lane and restricting where the parking is, or again, helping visually narrow that space and hopefully decrease the amount of speeding. This is what it would look like just to the west of Kit Ridge. As I mentioned, we have that extra wide space so we can provide parking on the north side for that little block and then parking also on the south side. Okay, that is that proposed design. I'm going to pause for questions again.
Okay, you all know the drill. Raise your hand, or you're welcome to unmute yourself or post a comment if you have questions on 53rd, or if you have a question on 51st that you didn't ask before as well. Y'all are like crickets out there tonight. Hopefully that means we're answering your questions.
Paige, I have a follow-up for you. I know we've gotten questions in the past about the bike path connection in this area. Can you speak a little bit more about when we expect that to come in and how these two relate to each other?
Yes, can you, sorry, bike path. What are you referring to? The trail connection?
Yeah, there's both the trail that's shown in the solid green line adjacent to the, and then there's that future airport connection that it's unclear when it'll go in.
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, Alicia, could you go one slide or to the bigger map? Just a couple at the beginning of 53rd. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So that dotted green line, we have it labeled North Airport Way. That is not what it would be called. It's a proposed trail. And south of Green Valley Ranch Boulevard, that trail is being built by, I think the Costco developer down there. So that part of the trail will be built out. And then north of there is actually owned by the Denver International Airport. And so it's kind of a matter of the city coordinating with them and kind of figuring out when and how to get that trail connection in. So it's really a to be determined situation, but that's kind of the status now. In terms of connection to the Derby Lateral Trail, we're working to see if we can install some crosswalks across 53rd Ave to connect people who are on the trail or just crossing 53rd and can go north. So that would just make it a little bit easier to cross 53rd. Any other trail connections that I should talk about, Dana, or any other questions you could think of?
No, I think that makes sense. And we're showing that the buffered bike lane kind of stops there at Memphis, but when that trail comes in, obviously we'll be thinking about finalizing that connection.
Yes, definitely. Right now, yeah, there's actually no road that connects to that trail. It's just the fire station. So to be more specific, we're ending at Memphis. We're not going to the fire station because it seems a bit silly to have a dead end bike lane there. So, but yes, we would definitely make that connection fully whenever that trail goes in. Yeah, it's always great when we can connect trails and on street bikeways. That's really our goal. The trails are so comfortable to ride on, and you just need to get there, with these on street bikeways.
Okay. Going. Any last questions? Okay, if we don't have another one, I think we can, let me get my slides back to Q&A here, and we can move on to kind of wrap up and next steps here. No last questions. Okay. Paige, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, so in terms of timeline, we have our plan section on the left. So that's how we determine where these bikeways should go. We started with our first meeting and talking with stakeholders in March of this year. We're at our design intent meeting, which basically means we're showing you what our design will look like and hearing your feedback on that. We're hoping to wrap up our design late this spring and then install the project sometime after July or after. We don't always solidify all our paving schedules right away. So that's why we call it a late season paving project. So we know it's going to be after July. We're just not entirely sure when. And we definitely have construction flyering. So that's everyone who's along each of these corridors will get a flyer that says, hey, we're going to be repaving your street around this time. And these will be the changes that will be coming.
And Paige, is that late season install for both 51st and 53rd?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So all of these projects that we propose to install bikeways on, we push until late season so that we have time to talk to everybody and make sure we're hearing everybody's concerns with the corridors and make sure we can do the best designs we can.
And the end of season is typically sort of October. So we're talking about a window between July and October. Sometimes we're really lucky, it'll be November, but that's the window we're talking about. And Paige, I know that council is interested in getting notes about when we come to do construction as well. So we'll make sure to some of the usual listservs in the neighborhood groups to make sure that they know this is coming at the time when it is coming, as well as those flyers on the street itself.
Yeah, great point, Dana. Yeah. And I think I forgot to mention Dallas. Sorry, if you could go back, Alicia. So North Dallas Street between 51st and 52nd, that's also in this late, basically summer to fall install period. For that one, we talked about it in our March meeting. We didn't hear a ton of feedback. It's pretty straightforward project, so we're kind of skipping straight to late design. But if you have any questions or concerns about that, feel free to email the project team. Okay, so you can connect with us. We have office hours set up. So it's just an hour that we can send you a link to, and you can call in or get on your computer and join us to ask one-on-one questions with the project team. And you can sign up for that at bit.ly/Denver Bike Paving. We mentioned the construction flyers, and then you can always email us at bikes@denvergov.org. And if you could just include what street you're talking about in the subject line, because we have projects going on all over the city and sometimes we get confused about what's happening everywhere. And then we've also got a phone number you're welcome to call. It's 303-223-6575. And we ask that you leave your name, your comments, and then if you want to call back, your contact information, and we'll be sure to call you back if that's what you want.
And then if you want to get email, if you didn't get an email about this, and if you want to get emails in the future, you're welcome to put your email in the chat or visit the website and add your name to those lists. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I also want to introduce this. We haven't done this at previous meetings. So if you have been at the previous meetings and taken a survey, this is a different kind. We have at bit.ly/NE Denver Meeting Survey. NE Denver Meeting Survey. It's kind of a customer service survey, just asking about how we're doing with these public meetings. We know with the virtual interface, it's a little bit tough and everything's been a little bit different this year. So we're trying to make sure we're getting the right information out and we're getting your feedback back as well. So if you would, please go to that. And it's a really quick survey, just says kind of what could we do better next time when we're talking to you, that would be great. bit.ly/NE Denver meeting survey. Okay. So we have a few more minutes for questions. We'll sit around for a few minutes. My guess is, given we haven't had a lot so far, that we won't have any more, but we're here. And if you don't have any questions, you are welcome to take your extra, what do we got? Giving you 40 minutes back of your night. So thank you all so much for those who came and participated. And get in touch with us and let us know your thoughts if you have any additional thoughts. Thank you so much.